my teaching learning session. Today we continue with BPCG 171 General Psychology. Speaking of general psychology, we continue with Unit 5. Today we are going to talk about information processing approaches. As we last time talked about approaches which is psychometric in nature, which is numeric in nature, in numbers, in forms of indices, cognitive indices. Not have either of the one, you cannot be called intelligence. Intelligence. Now, today we are going to talk about theories like Sternberg's theory, Gardner's theory, assessment of personality, which is assessment of intelligence, which is one of the most important part of intelligence, and individual differences. We are going to talk about types of intelligence and its test, and new kind of two intelligences, which is emotional and social. So let's continue and start with our unit. So speaking of Sternberg's theory of intelligence, which was given by Robert Sternberg had an ideology, and his theory stated that intelligence is something about identifying a place, modifying it, shaping it, and adapting to it. So people who are intelligent has the capacity to choose, shape, and adapt their environment as per their cultural and social norms. This completely goes to our environment in nowadays, that today's intelligence is about picking up the environment, shaping it, after shaping it, being able to utilize it, adapt to it, and modify it according to our cultural and social norms. So there are three types of intelligences in three forms, which was given by Robert Sternberg. One is componential, the other is contextual, and the other is experiential. So componential intelligence is also called as analytical intelligence. The reason that we speak about it as analytical intelligence is because componential talks about intelligence which is done in steps. So this intelligence usually would found with children who are extremely high IQ children, who perform extremely brilliantly in class, who do really well, and it comprises of three other parts within it, which is called as componential itself has three other parts in it, which talk about knowledge acquisition, meta component, and the last is performance. So why the three are there? The three talks about how we are able to relate to intelligently working individuals in society. Also, at the same time, this kind of intelligence are with people who are very good with academic skills, perform on A1 to A1 in their skills. They are always excellent. They're highly critical and analytical in their skills. So we can remove those bunch of children who tend to perform very good with academic grades and are always performing excellent, irrespective of anything. Now, speaking of another kind of intelligence, which is called as experiential intelligence. Experiential intelligence is an intelligence that talk like the term suggests, experiential. It does talk about catching up on experience. It is also called as creative intelligence. Creative intelligence because it is the ability to develop novel and creative ideas on the basis of the kind of experiences that you've had over time. So here, these would be people who have a creative intelligence, has the capacity to dwell in and give out new creative ideas, but on the basis of the fact of being able to use their past experiences as a support. So speaking of that, experiential intelligence is the ability to develop novel ideas and solutions. People high on creative intelligence tends to, they tend to use their old experiences, they learn from their old experiences, utilize it. So when we say of the first one, componential are usually those part of our society who perform extremely well in their academics. The second would be creative people, people who use their experiences in the backlog and utilize it to give us novel, creative, and supportive ideas. The last that we talk about is contextual. Context itself means support and situations, like our behavior in a particular situation. So it is context. It is also called as a practical intelligence. See, there is a reason because these people who are of contextual intelligence are able to adapt to the kind of environment that you put into. That's why it's called context. You put people in different kind of environment, and they tend to adapt to those specific environment. So that is their ability to adapt to the environment on the basis of the demands of the society. Also, it involves applying of knowledge, information to their real world and adapt accordingly. These people are also referred to as very business smart and street smart people. We will eventually find these people to be very street smart. would be managers, salespeople, people who are doing advertisements, because these people are always on their toes, are readily adapting to their environment, put them into any field work, any sort of environment, and as per the demand of the society, they mold themselves. Whereas experiential would be people who tend to, understand the environment on the basis of their experiences and creatively get into the environment. And the first is componential, which are smart, academically smart children, children who perform really well in academics. So that completes with Sternberg's theory of how Robert Sternberg, which was postulated in 1984. Let's have a a creative also to make it to understand it better. See, analytical, as I said, we'll talk about mental steps. There are three mental steps in analytical or componential intelligence, which is to acquire knowledge, meta component, which is metacognition, higher order skills of working, and the last will be performance. When we talk about practical intelligence, it's the ability to adapt to the context, different situation, demands of the society. These people are very street smart people. And the last that we spoke about is creative, also called as experiential. Creative ideas are generated on the basis of the ideas and experiences that you've had in your life. This completes with Robert Sternberg. Let's move to another theory, which is called Gardner's theory of intelligence. Gardner's theory was one of the first information processing approach. Information processing, that is an approach which spoke about that intelligence does not comprise of single entity, which is when we spoke about Charles Spearman theory of G and S factor, when we spoke about theories of Thurston, which is primary mental abilities, we spoke of intelligence combined by all these seven, which is primary ability, and being one. Whereas Howard Gardner discarded this view by stating that the classic view of intelligence is a capacity for logical thinking. He stated intelligence is just not about thinking competentially and analytically and creatively. He proposed that intelligence is not a single entity; it comes in various forms, and it's the ability, as it's mentioned on the slide, ability to solve problems, fashion products that are of consequence in a particular cultural setting and community. So that means this is the type of intelligence which could be found in different communities, different setups as per the kind of required skill needed. Let's take an example when we see singers around. And if, for example, the community is about singing, and singing is one of the most paramount part of that community, remember, musical intelligence would be something which would be a huge part of them. Then, if we speak about spatial intelligence is the intelligence of spaces. So, for example, if a person is surrounded with spaces and gains the knowledge of about spaces, areas, and tends to have better spatial intelligence, so as per the cultural settings and community that we are staying on, we have the ability to pick up different kinds of intelligence. There are 7 to 8 distinct type of intelligence which was given by Howard Gardner, which are these, and I'll support you with all the 8 that we understand. The first given on the upper on the slide is naturalistic. Naturalistic intelligence is found in people like gardeners, botanists, people who are associated to flora and fauna, which is so they are very nature smart. They're able to understand the kind of what kind of environment will grow, what kind of crops, what kind of flora and fauna. These are essentially gardeners and botanists and even natural scientists which work on nature. Then we have spatial intelligence that we just spoke of. These people are called as picture smart. The reason for them calling as picture smart is that they have the ability to manipulate, understand spaces, environment, and areas around them. So these could be architecture. They're also surgeons and also pilots. Pilots because they're able to understand spaces far better than any one of us. And then we come to bodily kinesthetic, a very known intelligence. These are athletes, dancers, gymnasts, people who are able to not only use their body frequently but also being able to balance it, balance their posture, balance their body, being able to perform while balancing high level of endurance and strength. So athletes, I feel gymnasts, even dancers are very high on bodily intelligence. Then speaking of musical, these people are music smart, have the understanding of rhythm and tones. They're able to draw out music, sing well. So these could be lyricists, music directors, even singers, and at times people who are playing any sort of musical instrument are also a part of musical intelligence. Then we come to logically mathematical. Logical mathematical is people who are very smart with numbers. This is number smart, logic smart people. They manipulate, use numbers really well, and essentially we find these people to be, scientists, people who are able to invent anything through numbers. So if you talk about Albert Einstein, he was more logic smart, intelligent person than any other. And these people are also mathematicians, arithmetic, using arithmetic on their daily living. Also, we have two very known intelligences, which is inter and intrapersonal, a kind of intelligence which is very popular in today's times. Interpersonal is intelligence which talks about being able to be smart with people while interacting, being able to understand other people's feelings and their emotions, and also interacting with them accordingly. And being able to regulate your tone, your mood, your conversations, and finding solutions to problem on the basis of interpersonal understanding of others. These people are people smart. You'll find them to be teachers, psychologists, counselors, also politicians. Politicians are also very people smart. And then we talk about intrapersonal. Intrapersonal is having an extreme awareness of oneself. So the ability to understand oneself thoroughly is called intrapersonal. These people have a keen insight about themselves. They know their strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats really well. And these people would be religious leaders and also spiritual seeker people, and philosophers also are part of intrapersonals. That's why they're able to answer the questions of why, hows, and what of our world. And the last that we speak about, the eighth one, is the linguistic. These are word smart people. They're able to manipulate literature, words, able to comprehend like text and literature well. These could also be teachers, poets, authors, the ones who write poem, are very good with book writing people. So essentially, these people are word smart. They could be writers. They can also be poet and lyricists because they're very good with words. So this completes with the eight kind of intelligences. So did we realize these two intelligences do not state us that there are only some specific part of the world who's intelligent, but tells us that adaptation is the key. Sternberg's theory told us that the ability to shape and be in the environment will make you adapt to it. Whereas Gardner told us that we do not have, intelligence as a single entity. There are people who are intelligent according to the kind of community and cultural setting that they belong. These are one of the most famous intelligence theories, and Howard Gardner theory is also applicable in society, in school living. We apply multiple theory of intelligence, which is also called multiple theory of intelligence, in school life and with children. So this completes with the two kinds of theories. Let's move to assessment of intelligence. See, assessment of intelligence is a formal way of identifying individual differences on the basis of intellectual capacity. The first two people who actually explored and started understanding the fact that intelligence can be tested, which can bring about differences in people in their capacity, was Simon Binet and Theodore Simon, which was Alfred Binet and Theodore Simon. And they were first able to develop a test in 1905. And with that time, in 1921, they gave us the concept of intelligence quotient also. And also in 1908, Alfred Binet and Simon came with a terminology which is called MA, which is called the mental age. So mental age is your capacity, age accordingly. Your mental capacity, your mental strength and understanding, age accordingly. So the concept of intelligence quotient came around at 1912. The intelligence quotient was actually brought about by William Stern. He utilized the concept of mental age given by Alfred Binet and divided it into chronological age and multiplied it to 100. So also it could be said people who are lower on their mental age and higher on their chronological age, they will be lesser intelligent. They can be, supposedly have some kind of concerns with their mental capacity. And people who are very high on their mental age and less on chronological age tend to be more intelligent. Their intelligent capacity and quotient would be higher in comparison to people who have low mental age. This is the formula. As I stated, MA upon CA into 100. 100 is given to avoid decimals, and we are able to have come in approximate percentage too. That's why we have added 100. Now, speaking of this, the concept of the fact that we need to know that not all of us are intelligent at the same level. This is called as the normal distribution curve. This actually tells us that how the intelligence is distributed in our population. So speak about the normal probability curve has some features. These features are the curve itself has a feature that it's bell shaped. The first feature is that it's bell shaped. The reason that it's bell shaped is to tell us that there are variation in intelligence. That suggests that intelligence do not lie on one part of the scale. It is lying on all the parts of the scale, suggesting that in our school, in our environment, in our world, we do not have only averages, but also children who are extremely intelligent and children who might not be able to doing well in society. So speaking of this, the central part that we found about, which is labeled as M, which is 34%, remember is the average part of our society. The average IQ of our country is from 90 to 100, and it's also increasing with the passage of time. From our time when we were kids, it was 90. Children today find 100, as one of the averages. So also to remember, the normal probability curve has another feature apart being bell-shaped, that the curve has maximum population lying around the center, which is we have maximum amount of averages in our country in comparison to the extreme ends. Then we need to know that these bell-shaped curves also reflect that intelligence is not the same across the globe. It is differing from one, it's differing for some people, differing it at the another end, signifies that intelligence is a varying capacity. So in a class, if there are 30 kids, always remember 15 of them or probably 20 of them would be people who are averages of the class, would be scoring from somewhere around 60, 65, 70, 75. Then there would be children who are extremely intelligent from 85 to 95 to 99. And then there would be ones who are extremely poor in intelligence, which is they would be somewhere around on the lower end, which suggests that these people would be lower in intelligence, which is somewhere lesser than 50%, 40%, and 30%, somewhere around 30%. And there would be some people which is extremely on the low lane, which is 2.35%, which is not passing, merely a 20%. Similarly, the higher side, which is 2.3%, you see it on your right side, are people who are extremely talented, of an IQ 140 and 130, getting 100 on 100 in every subject, are people who are talented and superiorly intelligent. So this finishes with the understanding that how does our intelligence scores looks on the population. It forms a normal probability curve, which is the distribution is of a normal scale, which is bell-shaped in nature. The distribution medium, which is the averages are centered around the center. Always the population varies from one end to the other. It does not remain the same. That finishes with the understanding of assessment was possible. And when the assessment was possible, we came of the fact classified intelligence test into various kinds. As soon as 1905 and 1910, 12, we had IQ. We started having an extreme number, huge number of testing that started coming. A lot of the tests came from Binet, which was Alfred Binet. He's one of the most popular psychologists of intelligence and gave a huge number of intelligence testing to us. So this test was classified on the basis of number of criteria. So first we will talk about individual testing. This is a test which is given to individual people. We need to form a rapport with this intelligence test. We need to develop a rapport, individually sit with these people and encounter all the questions that are done, like discuss the questions which are done by them. Some of the examples here are Stanford and Binet test, one of the most popular tests across the globe. It is also revised and given in India. Revised as per our mentality and population's criteria of intelligence. Kaufman scale and one of the most famous Wechsler scales of intelligence. Then we have Wechsler scales, as I said. Wechsler was one of the most popular intelligence theories, gave us very popular definition also that we had discussed, that intelligence is a global capacity that help us to think rationally, act purposefully, and deal with the environment effectively. He gave 3 scales divided into adult, school children, and preschool children. Then we come to group test. In contrast to individual tests, group tests are tests which are done in a huge number, where we were forming rapport with an individual people. Here we are not forming a rapport. We end up giving common instruction to set of 10 people, conduct a test and take the result. Quick in nature, gives lot of results, and no rapport formation needs to be done with this. Some of the most common ones are multidimensional aptitude battery, cognitive ability test. Usually aptitude tests are group test only because it's done with more than 10, 5 students together, because aptitude cannot be done individually. It's a great deal huge, testing will occupy a lot of time and strength. Then we come to other kinds of testing on the basis of literacy. One is called the verbal test. Verbal test are test which solves problem on the basis of language. So this will require language and literacy to perform this test successfully. And verbal test is restricted to people who understand language and have literacy. So the fact that we know that being literate does become one of the drawback in this testing. To cover this drawback, there was another kind of testing which was called as non-verbal testing. Non-verbal testings are extremely fit for people who are illiterate, do not understand language. Why? Because this comprise of completion of patterns, lines, and shapes. The example is given on your right as the screen has given. This is one of the most popular tests that we have, which is Raven's progressive matrices, RPM. Why it's called progressive? Because the difficulty level of the shapes increases with each page, each test question, and matrices because it has patterns. So this is capable for illiterates also. Illiterates can also complete it. Like for example, you should be understanding the first one that matches all of them and makes you understand that which should be the perfect match in the other. They are not very easy as tests; they are quite difficult. And when we speak about these testing, in this one, the fourth one is the answer. They're very difficult, and if we feel that patterns cannot test us, it really doesn't happen. No, non-verbal test reduce biases, it reduce any discrimination, cultural discrimination, and very fit for most cultures and most generations and language barriers. Then we come to something, as I've already discussed, non-verbal test. We visualize, solve problems on the basis of structures, concepts, and apart that, we also have test of performance. Performance test are test which is done apart verbal, non-verbal. We also have performance test. Performance test talks about manipulation of objects and performing it along with which is fixing. Like I'll give you an example. When we were young and when we went to school for the first time, we used to get block fixing as an activity in school, which is putting a star into a star, a shape of square into a square, circle into a circle. That is performance test, which is manipulation of objects and using your motor abilities, which is performance. These tests also reduces cultural barriers and literacy barriers. And one of the popular tests are post block test and Bhattia's battery. This completes with the types of tests on basis of language. Now let's come on the basis of culture. We have two types of tests: culture fair and culture bias. Culture fair tests are tests which are unique to a specific language, custom, expectation, environmental experiences, and values. They would be restricted. Like for example, a test which is made in America would only be restricted to American children, and that area would cannot be given to children of India. And on opposite to that, because of this reason, that culture is a big barrier. We cannot administer this kind of test to everybody. There came as culture fair test after culture bias test. Culture bias test are culture fair test are tests which are free from any sort of cultural biases. It does not focuses on a common language. Like in India, uh, initially the first few tests that came up were tests in Hindi, Bengali, Sanskrit, and Urdu. So later came culturally free tests, which were in English. English was a language which was available in all the country. It's school going children, and most children were learning that language. So, to keep it cultural free and no biases in it, these are tests which is common to all culture. One of the most common again is RPM, the shapes that we saw in the last picture. So that's called RPM, which is Raven's progressive matrices. This completes with the kind of tests that we have done on the basis of types in terms of literacy, language, and performance. There's another test which are not verbal, non-verbal, and literacy based. These are Draw a person test, these are tests which are on the basis of not finding out what you're experiencing right now, but draws out information of your unconscious. This was given by Goodenough and Harris in 1963. Very oldly, very old technique of testing, where children were usually asked to make three pictures: one boy, one girl, and anything else that they want to draw. And on the basis of drawing, interpretation was given. This is not a very direct test. These are indirect and projective techniques. Why projective? We will deal with these testing later in personality also. These are those testing that do not take out the conscious understanding of you, but the unconscious understanding of your environment. Now, culture-based test, we've already done this. Culture bias tests are tests which are, something which is specific to one culture, and do culture bias tests do have the difficulties of, having biases towards one culture. They cannot eliminate the kind of specific language and the kind of specific terms, values, expectations which is reflected. They are not culture fit. They cannot be used for everybody and anybody. So this finishes with test types of tests. Today we did intelligence information processing theory. We understood that intelligence can be tested and understood, and we did the types of tests. To understand that intelligent tests can be tested with the individual and group test, verbal non-verbal performance, culture fair, and culture bias test. Let's move to emotional and social intelligence that we talk about. One of the intelligences which are of great demand in our country now, and when we say great demand in our country, it's one of those intelligences that we really cannot survive without. So let's begin with emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence was first understood, explained by Salvoy and Mayer. Speaking of Salvoy and Mayer, these were one of the first psychologists who stated that apart from logical, critical intelligences, there's another intelligence which is emotional intelligence. The traditional test could measure only the cognitive ability. So when we speak about the cognitive ability, which is mental ability, which is logical in nature, factual in nature, we did lose out the non-cognitive ability, which helps us manage with people, understand people, have a better understanding of our own emotions, etc. So this was quoted that intelligence has comprises of a quotient which is called an IQ, which explains the cognitive facility and ability of a person. So in contrast to that, in the early 90s, as I said, John Mayer and Peter Salvoy, which is Salvoy and Mayer, both of them defined a non-cognitive ability intelligence, which was called as emotional intelligence. So what is cognitive ability intelligence, which is IQ? Why? Because cognition is the ability to think, reason, understand well, judge well, decide well. Whereas when we talk about emotional intelligence does not speak about the ability to reason, understand, or judge well, but it speaks about the ability to relate to one's emotions well. The ability to understand not only your emotion but other people's emotion in the society, and then being able to be operating in society. So let's get into the definition given by both Salvoy and Young. So it's the ability to perceive and express emotions, assimilate emotions in thought, understand emotions with reasons, and regulate in self and others, which is very true. Emotional intelligence is the ability to be able to understand your emotion, being able to perceive, being able to reason the same emotions that you're experiencing, at the same time knowing, understanding, and assimilating and documenting other people's emotion, documenting in terms of understanding it, and then operating or solving a problem. So when we speak of this, remember it is an ability of today's time. Emotionally intelligent people perform far better than people who just have an IQ. So let's move to more things, which was given by Salvoy and Mayer. Proposed an integrated model also about EI, which is emotional intelligence. According to them, EI comprises of four following abilities. One is perceiving and expressing emotion, which is very true. So when they talk about components and they talk about integrative ability, they are trying to tell us that emotional intelligence had a model that stated there are four abilities in it. The first is perceiving and identifying emotion and expressing it well. So this talks about being able to understand that you are happy right now, And happiness can be expressed with a smile. It can be expressed with feeling of probably a happy state of sense, which is elated, smiling, expressing that happiness with people. So first is correct identification and expressing it correctly. Then we talk about assimilating emotions and thoughts, which is the ability to use emotions, which is the ability to use emotion and then using those emotions to facilitate your cognitive processes, which is probably having a fight with a friend, and that fight has emotionally been very irrational of speaking bad things to one another. You tend to assimilate, which is you tend to gather all the things which is being said, try to introspect it and then understand the situation, what the other person might have gone through, problem solve, thought about it, reasoned it well, and then encountered your friend or anybody later. So this is about using your emotions to solve problems. Then we talk about understanding and analyzing emotion. This is just to, when we're talking to people face to face, the ability to, understand the language. At the same time, non-verbals and verbal communication, which is non-verbals are something that speaks about, the expressions of the eyes, the hand movements, the body posture, slouchy or very alert. So these are non-verbals that helps you analyze the actual emotions of people. And the last is, which is the most important, emotional intelligence, I feel, rests on this ability, which is regulation of emotion. The reason is regulation talks about being able to regulate your emotion thoroughly, not only understanding your emotions but also other people's emotion. And when we speak about this, remember, this suggests that when we are able to regulate our emotions according to people's situation and time, that actually tells us that we are high on emotional intelligence. If there is no emotional outburst, you know what is to be said, what, when, according to other people too. That's about how high emotional quotient of people. And always understand, people who are able to control, analyze their emotions well, are able to work extremely well in the kind of stressful environment that we have today. So much of competition, so much of scaling up the height in terms in 2 days, in one day. So all of this is only supported with extremely high emotional intelligence. Now, this is what emotional intelligence will comprise of. You need to be very self-aware, you need to be empathetic, extremely motivated. Self-regulation is the key, as I said, and social skills. Social skill is the interpersonal ability that we spoke about in Howard Gardner. Now, after emotional intelligence, let's move to another kind of intelligence, which is also a non-cognitive ability, which is social intelligence. This was postulated first and found by E.L. Thorndike. He stated that this term should actually be used to explain the, understanding of how people manage other people wisely. So the skill of managing other people wisely is social skills. That's why it's social intelligence. And let's understand the actual operational definition, which was given by Goldman in by of social intelligence. He defined social intelligence to be being intelligent is just not about our relationship, but also in them. This, according to Salvo and Meres, intelligence, emotional intelligence of social intelligence. So this is a kind of intelligence which is not about being intelligent in relationship, but also being intelligent with people. So how smart you are with people, how smart you're able to manage yourself, decide, regulate with number of people, understand them, is all social intelligence. Then Barron in 16 or 2006 proposed there are two terms related to social intelligence, and he further also pointed out that that in the theory of intelligence of Gardner conceptualized personal intelligence, which is a combination of inter and intraperson, which came far more later. After Howard Gardner had proposed his theory, he said there is another kind of intelligence which could be personal intelligence, which is a combination of inter and intrapersonal, which is both understanding of self and understanding of others, which combines to become personal, which is equivalent to social intelligence. Then, according to Barron model, emotional social intelligence, he actually combined the two kind of non-cognitive abilities together and stated that social and emotional intelligence, he did a cross-sectional study also and related them together and stated that there's an index which could be made, which is called ESI. social emotional index. So he stated that emotional and social competencies, skills, facilitators, and facilitators that determine how effectively we understand, express ourselves, understand others, relate to them, and cope with the demands daily. So, what is social emotional competency together? Being able to relate to others, being able to manage people and time with others, being able to deal with people on a daily living and cope with them. So that is social emotional competency, which is this. So we all know that emotional intelligence is about awareness, and adaptability is about social intelligence. Awareness about oneself and others is EI, and adaptability with people, situation, and others is SI. We get them together to get into a new concept that we should be aware of, which is called attunement. Attunement is a concept that talks about being adjusted with the use of awareness of yourself and adaptability with others. Remember, this kind of intelligence is so useful in today's time. Our ability to know people and being able to adapt to them is one of the best things that we can comprise as competency today when we are working in our day to day life, dealing with people, situations, events, and life. So, this completes with something that we speak about was as intelligence. Now, speaking of Unit 6, we move to a whole new concept. So, as we understood, when we talk about general psychology, we spoke about intelligence. We spoke about, what was psychology, how was its evolution, or what was learning all about, memory all about. Intelligence is one of the most first important attribute of humans, because intelligence is a construct that differs you from people to people. Second is personality. So we move to unit 6, which will talk about personality theories, and we will introduce it, understand what personality as a definition is. We will get into theories of personality. Theories of personality is an ideology telling us that how personality was demonstrated and explained by different psychologists. One of the most famous theories and one of the most controversially accepted, not accepted theory was psychoanalytical theories, which was given by Sigmund Freud. And then we will move after Sigmund Freud, we will move to Neo-Freudians. Neo-Freudians are Freudians which came after Freud. They were followers of Freud, but they took they just moved away from him because of some discrepancies with the ideas and understanding of personality. Then we will talk about behavioral approach to personality. Behavioral approaches, how the approach of behavior explains personality. Then there would be humanistic approach to personality, and one of the most famous approaches and one of the most used approaches in today's times. And then we will do again trait approaches, which comprises of different psychologists. One of the most important was Allport, Ising, Cattell's theory. And then we will do the big five factor theory, one of the most famous theory of those times. And then finally would be assessment. This is unit 6 that we have moved down to. After understanding human intelligence, we move to personality. Personality is one of the most vibrant, I feel, concepts of life, because when we speak about personality, I feel personality, came from the concept of the Roman and Greek times, where people, when theater, I feel, in Roman times, even before, I'm talking about even before the Second World War, where theater was so common in Roman times, and when theater was common, people associated personality with the term called persona, the mask which was worn by actors to represent a particular emotional theatrical play of their character. So when this entire thing was happening in the theatrical world and in theaters of Roman times, people felt that we also comprise of something as a persona, and they defined it as personality. So personality is a dynamic organization inside the person, which is a both it's both psycho and physical system, which creates characteristics in people, which will then lead to patterns of thoughts, behaviors, and feelings. So why it is psychophysical? Personality, when we see people also, that's one of the most common things that we find around ourselves. When we meet anybody, we have this, this habit of speaking to people and saying, he or she has a great personality. We are not talking in terms of the cognitive or psychological aspect, but in terms of physical aspect. So when we speak about the physical aspect, we talk about the physical world. And when we talk, we call about the physical, which is the physical, psychophysical. And when we talk about their attributes of being smart, being presentable, being able to address so many people together, amiable as a person, as personality, these are psychological features. So remember, it's dynamic in nature, which is personality does remain same over time, but it has the ability to change during drastic conditions, traumatic conditions, etc. And also, it has some characteristic pattern that stays with you across time and situation. So that was as the definition was given by Jordan Olcott. Let's move to the first theory of personality that we start with, which is Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud has been one of the most famous psychologists, but at the same time, he has also received a lot of what do you call that, a lot of repulsion from other psychologists because of the ways that he had put up personality theories. His theories were called as psychoanalytical theories because he spoke about analyzing the psyche at different levels, so that's why it's called as analytical psychology. Also, he was a physician first and then he studied psychology and got into clinical practice with his patients, and with the process of time started developing the understanding of psychology as his clinical practice. He was a physician, then converted his understanding into MD psychiatry and then further clinical practice. Also, unconscious mental process was one of the central theses of his entire theory. So he was one of the first psychologists who stated that behavior is a manifestation of unconscious motives and desires. That means behavior is an outproduct of whatever that is coming from feelings, thoughts, and desires which are unconscious in nature. So, and remember when we speak about these feelings and desires, they are unconscious in nature, they are something that we are not aware of, something that we cannot dwell into at all. So that was Sigmund Freud as an introduction, and this is his image. This is Sigmund Freud approximately in his 50s and 60s. Sigmund Freud was alive till 75, 76 years of age. He was at the times of the World War, Second World War, not a German. Sigmund Freud was the only Jew, I feel, the only Jew that you will find in psychology. Yes, there has been a lot of discrimination that he has received. Sigmund Freud was had nominated himself 13 times for a Nobel Prize, but unfortunately did not even receive one. For a lot of reasons, because of his theories not being very scientifically rigorous, and also I feel a lot of discrimination, and also the kind of things that he quoted was never cultural appropriate. It's not. It was not culturally appropriate in the Western world at that time, at around 1900s and 20s, 40s, when the Second World War also came in, and even later, which is today's time. We are not able to understand and relate to those concepts even today. Let's understand the first model which was given. There are three concepts which are given. Let's understand by Sigmund Freud: the topographical model of psyche, then the structural model of personality, and then the this is psychosexual stages, not social. This is psychosexual stages of development, which was given by Sigmund Freud. Now, let's start with the three out of the first model. The first out of the three things that we discussed, which is topographical model of the mind. So Sigmund Freud divided the mind into three parts, stated that our mind comprises of three parts that we function in. The first is called the conscious part. The conscious, I'll also show you the image, it becomes easy for you. This is the image. So the part which is seen at the upper level, which is the thought, perception, and ideas that you have at the conscious level of yours, it's something which is prevailing right now, the here and now of your mind, which is me talking and explaining, you watching this session or over the media would be the conscious level. This is something which is available to you all the time. This information would always be available to you. My sessions would always be available to you. It could be conscious awareness with you. Then we come to something which is called the pre-conscious and also called as the subconscious. This part of the mind deals with all those information for which you are currently aware, not aware, but can if you pay attention. So this would be related to something which is the subconscious and the pre-conscious are those parts of your mind which are associated probably to things which has been 5 years back, 10 years back, or probably, let's take an example. I'll give you an example of a child and then understand all of it. Let's take the pre-conscious and subconscious would be memories of 10 years back. If you go back to pictures and conversation of those time, you can recover them. So recovery is possible We can get back these information only if we pay attention and if we pay some focus onto it. Then there is unconscious. Unconscious, according to Sigmund Freud, was the reservoir, of your all the drives, all the sexual drives, all the instincts that he studied. So this part of the mind comprises of everything which has been socially unacceptable. Those needs and desires which has not been acceptable probably has given some immoral urges, some selfish needs, some irrational, needs of yours or wishes, shameful experiences that you do not want to discuss with people, some violent motive, some sexual desires, some sexual feeling towards people is something which is here. So this part of your mind, as you see the iceberg, did you see it's under the water? It does not float up, and it's the dark blue color. That means it's never even visible to you. It does not come out in your daily living, and it's not even visible to you. And then we speak about the preconscious. Preconscious is something that keeps flowing up and down. We can retrieve it. It can become accessible to us. And conscious is the most, I feel, the most socially acceptable perspective of our life is the conscious, which is the here and now. So see, our mind is divided in the terms of iceberg. The part of the iceberg which is not visible at all, which can be taken as something as some sexual desires, some immoral motives, wishes, probably deceitful wishes of people, selfish, some selfish wishes, desires, and thoughts you had about people, events, and situation would be here, but they're not available to you, not present with you. You cannot even derive them out. So this was the topographical model of Sigmund Freud. Let's move to the next, which is the structural model of personality. So, speaking of structural model of personality, Sigmund Freud stated that our personality, our behavior that comes out in the personality is because of three components: id, ego, superego. So, let's understand that id is the part of personality that operates on basic instincts, something that is out of our control, biological basic needs, aggressive needs that needs to be completed and committed to. You cannot undo it. It's basic needs of hunger, sex, and thirst and shelter. It's unavoidable. You cannot avoid it. It's the pleasure principle, and it usually seeks to gratify one's need immediately. It does not wait at all, and it also comprises of eros and thanatos. These were two instincts that we speak about. Eros is the life instinct, which is the god of love in the Greek mythology, and according to Sigmund Freud, in it, Eros is the life force, which is the sexual energy, and death force was the thanatos and the death instincts. Death instincts are something which suppresses, completes, finishes, destructs your energy, whereas life instincts is sexual energy, biological drives, which are always there in our body, and they're 80% according to Sigmund Freud, and destructive drives were 20%. So he said what overpowered humans was the eros, not the thanatos. Remember, what are the features of it? It is, yes, it is immoral, it is immediate gratification of needs, it is basic instinctual drives, wants to complete the need now, here and now, will not wait for anything. Then we come to ego. Ego is something which is the reality part of the world. It also gives you the reality check. Ego is something which is the reality principle. It tries to delay your gratification of it. So ego is something which tries to balance you by delaying your gratification, by making you achieve that instinctual drive, but on the basis of realistic situation and appropriate as per the society. This part of the personality usually emerges from id only, but its main aim is to balance your id and your superego, which we will study just after this. So, it's the decision making component. It will make sure that you achieve the basic desires, the sexual drives. The gratification is done. The things are done of id, but it's done in a very realistic and a very reality based oriented manner, which does not give you guilt at all. If you do something on the basis of guilt, it gives you too much of anxiety, it gives you too much of guilt, it gives you too much of shame. So this is what ego does. It reduces the shame, the guilt, and the unfavoring immoral thought. Does everything on the basis of reality. That's why it's called the reality principle. The last is called the superego. This is the morality principle. It is given by our parents through socialization. This is superego. Terms, condition, value, moral ethics given by society and your, usually given by society and culture by your parents, like instilled in you by your parents. This controls it, does not let it gratify. It says you have to be morally appropriate all the time. And our superego consists of two parts, which is the conscience and the ideal self. The conscience role is to punish or reward if you do something, which punish you if you do something wrong, and reward you if you do something right. So rewarding is when you do something good, and and if you do something shameful, you'll be punished. I'll give you an example for this, quite a many examples for this. Then we speak of the other, which is the ideal self. This is the picture of your own self, also to do the job making you feel guilty or pride, depending upon your behavior. So this is the kind of your own self, that a picture of your own self, an idealistic self that you create, which is for you to become. This is the kind of person that you want to become, and this always keeps making you feel guilty that this is what I want to do, this is what I should be, and it always keeps creating that guilt in you that I want to become this ideal self in my life. So conscience is the feeling of it's the conscience role is doing the rational thing. If you don't do it, you'll be punished. Else, if you do the right thing, you'll be rewarded. Ideal self is the kind of self that you should be becoming. If you don't, it provides you guilt. That's how superego function in us. I'll give you an example of this in 2 3 ways in our society. It is I want to do it right now. Ego is let's figure it out and work together. It's not something that you should get right now, right here. And superego is good people never do this. So I'll give you 2 3 examples of this. Let's take an example. A child wants to eat an ice cream. What will the it do? The it will quickly go snatch away an ice cream and tell the mother to give. So the child is already opened the wrapper, ate, licked an ice cream, done. What is this? This is immediate gratification, very immoral, not right. What does the superego will make the child do? The child might feel, no, ice cream is not right. My mother did not allow me. I'm not eating an ice cream. It's a complete no, because I'll be punished. The conscience, rational, be rational, and else you'll be punished. What's this? What's the ego? Ego is okay. Let's take permission. I want to eat it, but let's ask my mother. It's really hot. You never know she loves me, and I'll have it then. Permission taking is ego, which is I'm delaying your gratification. That immoral sense is getting delayed and getting permission also. So remember, I'll give you an example. We all have seen horses in horse races, race course. Horse is the id. It has umpteen amount of energy, and when it does not, it's not trained, does not have blinders. The blinders here, it does not run straight. What are the blinders? The blinders are super ego. Run just straight. So blinders usually are there to make the horse run just in the same direction. They will, if you put a blinder in front of the horse will just run straight irrespective of taking a turn. Who's the ego? The person who's riding the horse and using the rein to control it. The rein becomes the ego. That's how our behavior works in all day times, which is id, ego, and super ego. I'll give you another example of this. For example, you are in an examination and unfortunately you did not know the paper. What will it do? Quickly cheat from everybody, take their paper, ask the answers as much as possible, and finish their paper. What will superego do? I will write as much as I want to generally. I don't know the paper, did not study well. I knew this had to happen with me. I cannot cheat. It's immoral. I'll be punished. My image will go bad in front of my teachers. So that is superego. But what does ego know? Ego knows we need to balance it. If the child fails, that's going to be extremely guilty again. But if they cheat, it's going to lead to very bad image. So the child writes the paper till for one extreme good hour, which creates an image the child knows the paper. And then in the last 1 hour, the child looks around, looks and peeps around, does not ask people, sees the answer here, hear people talking, catches the answers and writes. That's the ego. Ego delayed the gratification, did not sneak anything from the other people, but is able to seek and satisfy your id and also take care of superego. You did not cheat. You ideally did not cheat. Ego and superego works, and in even everyday life, you could see, people lying to one another is id, cheating on one another is id. People extremely not talking to other people, cutting down with other people, opposite gender, immoral activities, not getting into promiscuous sexual urges is superego. People extending friendship and then staying with them to know and know the feel of the person but not doing anything wrong is ego. So that's how your gratification is there, but it's delayed and not fully fulfilled. So that's what ego does to us. But ego's work I feel is so much that we need to know ego also gets trouble. Ego has a role to protect you from anxiety every time that the id is there. The biological need comes in, the sexual need comes in, the ego comes to take care of you. So remember, whenever there is anxiety, ego not only it just delays your gratification, at times it uses ego defense mechanism to delay this gratification. So these are, whenever there is anxiety and stress from your desires and motives makes you overwhelmed, we try to use some strategies to take care of those desires. That is called as ego defense mechanism. This Freud solely aimed to employ. These were there to relieve the anxiety which was created by id, and which controlled the individual by making them shameful, guilty, anxious. So what did the ego did? Ego, this just not using delay on gratification, use this ego defense mechanism for us. So let's go through all of them. One is denial. Denial is, there are examples also which I've mentioned in the screen. One refuses, admits that I do not take alcohol. So if a person asks you, are you alcoholic? The person completely refuses, which is denial. I do not take alcohol at all. That's denial. Then there is displacement, whereas you put your source of anxiety and displace it to the other people, which is, for example, Mark is angry with his older brother but does not express on Mark, but verbally abuses the server, which is the waiter in the restaurant. So, which is displacement from the original to the substitute. This is again a good defense mechanism. Then there is projection, which is attributing your own unacceptable desires on other people, which is like Chris often cheats on her boyfriend but claims and asks the boyfriend that you are cheating. So this is like you projecting your feelings onto the other. Projection is one of the most common defense mechanism which people above 15, 16 starts doing. Then we have rationalization. This is simply excuse making, justifying your behavior. Like, I did not do well in exam because my teacher made a very difficult paper. It was so difficult. She failed everybody. That's rationalization. Then there is reaction formation. Reaction formation talks about, reducing anxiety by adopting something extremely opposite of what you're feeling. Example given, Nadia is angry with her co-worker, Beth, for always arriving late to work after a night of partying. But she is nice and agreeable to Beth and confirms that partying is really cool. Did you see the opposite feeling? We do it often. You fight at home with your siblings. You go out and then you protect your siblings in front of other people. This is a very, very common defense mechanism, as times used for socially appropriate behaviors, at times used for being socially appropriate also. Then there is regression. Regression and depression was one of the first few defenses which was given by Sigmund Freud. It stated that regression is returning to coping strategy which are less adequate, which is returning to coping strategy of previous year of life. So very simple example. You want to go out with friends for a movie or probably for a trip. Your parents don't agree. What do? You start crying. You lock doors, don't eat food. This is done by children, preschoolers, lying and showing temper tantrums. So, resorting to something which is lesser progressive and less adequate and mature as per your stage is something which is defense mechanism. So, speaking of that, that finishes with defenses today and personality theories. Thank you.